It is harvest time here in Western New York, and we couldn't be more excited about the incredible produce that we're finding at the farmers markets, including pumpkins. And not just orange pumpkins, but pumpkins of all shapes and sizes and all colors. I've always loved the look at those big fat Cinderella pumpkins that are stacked on top of each other. And I'm going to try to recreate that look using the new IOD Hello Pumpkin mold. Here's what I'm going to do to get started. This is an 11 by 30 inch board, one of my Grain Sack Stencils, the Roycycled Urn Stencil, some Fusion Mineral Paint, and Pentart Anthracite Paste. Base coat the wood plank with a couple coats of white paint and then stencil on the grain sack design. When I'm stenciling, I use a very small amount of paint and I offload it onto a paper towel. This will distribute the paint around the top of the stencil brush and also remove the excess. Then I'm going to randomly stencil this pattern onto the painted board. You'll find a complete list of all of the supplies that I've used for this stacked pumpkin project in the description box below. Next, I'm going to stencil the urn pattern using the same Fusion Mineral Paint color, Ash. I'm going to begin the process of creating some really interesting depth and texture on this urn. This is Pentart's stone paste in the color Anthracite. With a palette knife, I'm going to apply this over the stencil, getting it into all of those open areas. See that I also use the palette knife to create additional texture.
You found the story all tucked away in the back of the room.
Then lift the stencil straight up and allow the stone effect paste to dry completely.
In the midst of our day-to-day routine, in the corner of our mind.
This is the Pentart Rust Effect paint set. It's an acrylic paint set that seriously has the perfect colors for creating a rust look. It also comes with a 3D powder used to create raised effects. I'm just using the paint today because it's a no-brainer for getting those rust colors correct. With my stencil brush, I'm going to apply the rust-colored paint randomly over those stenciled areas of anthracite stone paste. That passes on will somehow be gone. We are so thankful that you've joined us here today for this tutorial. While you're here, we would so appreciate it if you would go ahead and hit that subscribe button, share a comment, share this video, and give us a big old thumbs up.
Among the things I like to do, craving is one for two, and the light of the day that passes on will somehow be gone.
In some areas, I'm going to water down the rust effect paint and apply a wash over certain areas. Each layer that I apply in this urn stencil is just going to create so much more depth and texture. I'll use the new IOD Hello Pumpkin mold. This is a limited release mold for the holiday season 2023. Roll your air dry clay into a shape roughly the size of the pumpkin mold that you're going to create. Press that into the mold. I'm not concerned about creating a stem for all of these pumpkins because many of them I'm going to trim away simply because we'll be stacking them one on top of the other. You simply apply some cornstarch into the mold, press the clay down into that mold, and then remove any excess with your thumbs. I use the micro rim as a guide. This is a pretty good size mold, so I'm not as concerned about flattening out the back with a putty knife. You may just want to get it as smooth as you can with your fingers. Actually, I'm thinking that the uneven surface of the clay on the back of the mold might give me some very interesting bumpy texture when I stack up these pumpkins later. I've cast several of both sizes of pumpkins. You'll want to judge how many you need based on the height from the top of your stenciled urn to about 1 to 2 inches below the top of your board. I want to be able to stack these pumpkins and use some gradient sizing with them. So I just use the edge of a credit card. You can use an X-Acto knife, whatever you have on hand to trim away the outside edges. I follow the contour of the pumpkin by using those grooved sections as a guide.
Yesterday there was sun and there was rain, beauty in the mundane, and as the light startled our eyes, we let go of disguise. And now there's something in the air and a sparkly shimmer on our skin, restoring everything within.
Here I've started to lay out my pumpkins with a dry fit just to get an idea of the composition. I'll do this several times during this whole process of stacking the molded pumpkins. Also, begin to cast several different types of the leaves. I always make sure that I have plenty on hand. Any that are excess can always be used to tuck under the pumpkins in areas where I need to use a little lift or a riser.
Dreamy, breezy
As I'm developing my pumpkin stack, I'm also cutting away any stems that I don't need. Once I have dry fit everything in place and I have the correct composition, I start to move the pumpkins away so that I can begin gluing from the bottom up.
We lose track of time, head up high, now we climb.
I add leaves here and there. Some I apply to the tops of the pumpkins, some out to the side, and some I will even tuck underneath the pumpkins so that they peek out from behind. I do this so that I create a more realistic composition of those stacked pumpkins.
Dreamy, breezy, we go. Easy, easy on our tiptoes. Undercover agents of the other. Beyond gravel.
And just add a few random leaves around the base of the urn.
A bigger scale, the world in hand.
And we'll let it all dry for several hours until the air dry clay has completely hardened.
I wouldn't want it any other way.
For the paint colors, I've chosen those beautiful muted colors that we see at the farmer's market. I've gotten Apothecary, Farm Fresh, I'm using Summer Crush, Cowgirl Coral, and a little bit of Sandy Blonde or Frayed Burlap. I'm going to be mixing my paints with Debi's DIY Clear Liquid Patina so that I create a kind of a glaze effect with these colors. Remember, I want to keep the colors very soft and muted and watercolory. I dip my paint into water, into the liquid patina, and then into the paint. Debi's DIY paints are highly pigmented, so they can be diluted with water and the liquid patina, and you will not lose that intense, beautiful color, even though you're applying sheer layers of paint. Throughout the painting process, I am using random colors of paint as additional layers over top of contrasting colors to create a very mottled look. I'll also use a baby wipe to dab away areas of paint. Again, I want to create a very mottled and uneven look on the pumpkins. Occasionally, I'll add a few very watery splatters of the paint mixture.
I heard you say you found the story all tucked away in the back of the room. Been lost for years, far away from the glory in the midst of corner of our minds. We're not in bloom. We're not in.
After I've allowed my paint to dry, my final step is to apply some Debi's DIY dark wax on my entire board and create some shading on the pumpkins as well. I'll use Debi's DIY clear wax as an eraser to pull away any excess dark wax.
And the light of the day that passes on will somehow be gone.
Project complete. A big old stack of pumpkins on top of a rusty old urn. That's the look that I like. Please let us know what you think of this project and what else you'd like to see from us at L&J Goods. L&J Goods is a brick and mortar shop located at 435 Main Street in Medina, New York. And you can also find us at lnjgoods.com.